What is up, everybody, and welcome to KnifeCast Episode 6. Today's topic is going to be Grail knives. The last couple of episodes we've done have gotten pretty granular, and so the guys and I today just wanted to kind of sit back and chat a little bit about some of our favorite knives, some of the coolest stuff in the market, and just get a little bit giddy over some Grail knives. So real quick, before we jump into the cast, we have a couple of recap items from the previous episode. Josh, I know you have something to tell us.
Yeah, so I mentioned Gareth Bull was at the source or slightly cited as close to being to the source of the front flipper in the last episode. He did get in touch with me, and he told me he didn't really start using it, or he wasn't introduced into it until like 14 years ago when he first moved to South Africa. But he did give me this little tidbit of information, and he even sent me like a voice message like telling me how to pronounce it because he knows how bad I am at pronouncing stuff. But it was one of those things where like you play it once and it's gone, and I've kind of forgot. So he's going to cringe when he hear me say this name, but I'm going to do the best I can. He said this guy called... the way it's written and in English, you would say Fannie Lagrange, F-A-N-I-E Lagrange. But the way he pronounced it was like with some phlegm and with some like, I don't know, like French. So, I mean, it was like or whatever. But this guy he started using the front flipper in either the late 80s or the early 90s, and it was because he really, 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 really hated thumb studs. That's exactly what Gareth told me. So that was great, and I appreciate Gareth for giving us that information.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting.
Cool.
Frank, you got something too.
Yeah, well, whenever I go into these sort of scientific discussions, I always run the risk of saying things that may not be totally accurate. And so Craig Brown of Brown Knives, he got in touch with me, and he wanted to talk to me about a statement that I made about pivots and their diameters in the last one. And he said that the pivot diameter does not necessarily increase friction as it gets larger. So that may have not been totally accurate. The way we left it was that he really wants to come on the show at some point and talk about his knowledge with regards to sort of the engineering of a folding knife. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Definitely something we got to do in the near future.
Yeah,
For sure.
So before we jump in, let's go ahead and go around the table and talk about either what we carried today or some recent exciting acquisitions. Josh, what do you got?
I carried the 3.3-inch carbon fiber liner lock Chamois. I'm starting to
my old knife.
Yeah, it was yours. I'm starting to hate this knife because it's so damn good. I can't pick up anything else right now. It's just such. It is. It's the perfect, ideal EDC for me. Like he really did a great job with those.
When I had that knife on loan, I mean, I don't think it was that one, but it was the same model. It's hard to beat, man. It's hard to beat.
Yeah, he just had another drop of them. I hope those are just as good. I'm sure they will be.
Those sell out like in a microcosm of like not like whatever the smallest amount of measurable time is in the known universe. That is how fast those knives sell out.
I'm pretty
one
sure.
One guy got two of them.
Ooh.
He's
one
spoofing.
guy.
He's hacking.
I don't know, man. One guy landed both the 3-inch small one, and he landed a boomerang drop point.
Wow.
Same guy.
I don't want to say he's hacking because I don't want people to get mad at him. He might not be, but
He's not. He got in touch with me afterwards. He's like, "Holy crap! I won both of them. That's insane."
When I get a message on Instagram for those things, like there's already been like 100 and something comments.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I get the messages. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get one. Then, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I really think people's like your internet connection matters when it comes to succeeding at one of those.
Google
It
Fiber.
really does. It really does.
You just got to be on. You got to literally hit refresh and have it show up on your feed.
You got to clear the RAM. You got to clear the RAM on your phone. You got to turn off all of the other devices in your house that are using internet, and you just got to pray.
You know what I heard? So like everybody should do this next time there's a drop. I heard this works every single time. If you put your phone on the airplane mode, you'll get it. It just works. I don't know how it works, but it does.
You're an evil man, Josh. You're a very evil man. That's not even nice.
In the same way that I can get stat boosts in video games by hitting Alt F4, right?
Just unplug your router. That's all you got to do. Unplug it.
Frank, what you got going on, man?
Such a jerk. Today, okay, so I'll talk about what I was carrying today. It's not quite as exciting as some of these customs, but I just sort of pimped out a paramilitary 2 with some carbon fiber scales. I think this thing is awesome now. I'm really enjoying it. But I did just get an exciting acquisition, and it's somewhat public. Peter Rosenti built me a mini Satori that I'm going to be picking up at Blade Show. So really excited about that one.
Sick, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And I got to say, like, you have a very specific talent of finding these material makers and these accessory makers that make some of the coolest looking stuff, bar none. Like, you can like pimp out a knife like nobody else.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's kind of fun because I'm at a point right now, and you are directly benefiting from this, and so are you, Tyler, actually, that I can actually connect these people, a materials maker and a product maker, and it's starting to make these really awesome projects come together, and there's going to be some more rolling out throughout the rest of the year because of all this, so it is a lot of fun.
You're the exhibit of the knife world.
The exhibit.
That's an old reference, son. Man.
Oh, man, I got to make that show. Pimp your knife, son.
Pimp your knife.
I got this paramilitary 2. I put 2 10-inch subwoofers and a pool in the back.
Oh my god.
Nice. That's hilarious.
So I haven't I was working on a project earlier today in my backyard that didn't require a knife, so I haven't carried anything today, but I'm sure everybody's seen my Instagram feed sort of pouring this Andre Thorburn acquisition all over everybody's face. This thing with Julian Marshall bolsters is like,
oh, fuck, it's man. So nice. So explain that bolster to me.
So it's zirconium, it's hand engraved, and the silver bits are sterling silver inlays. And the zirconium is flamed blue. So it's magnificent.
It's a vibrant blue. Like, it is like the bluest blue. Well, it's just incredible.
The interesting thing,
very consistent color.
It sort of is, and then it sort of isn't. So it's kind of weird. Like, the way that the light hits the engraving has a lot to do with the way it appears. So in direct light, it's sort of kind of like a flat blue. It all looks like the same color. But if you tilt it so that it's not in direct light, you start to see all the individual lines of the engraving come to life in like a much lighter baby blue shade. It's all optics, right? It's nothing too crazy, but I have some pictures on Instagram that specifically show this like crazy two-tone dark blue, light blue, where all the little lines of the engraving are each filled in so that you can see the detail. And man, it's so dimensional and it's fantastic. I mean, the knife itself is amazing. Like, the action's the best action in my collection now, 100%. But the bolsters really, man, bring that thing to life.
Yeah, I'm looking at a video of it now. It's really nice.
That's pretty stuff.
So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it, guys. So like I said, what we wanted to talk about today was Grail knives. So we've kind of broken this down into 2 sections. First, the 3 of us are going to tell you guys, the listeners, sort of what the term Grail knife means to us personally, so that you sort of know where we're coming from. And then once we get through that, we're going to each kind of review some of the stuff that that's been on our list or that gets our blood pumping. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Frank, you're going to take it away.
Okay, well, I guess since I'm going first here, I think we should just talk about the term Grail itself. I mean, what does that word even mean? Is it a cup? Is it something? It seems to be something that's sort of almost unattainable, something that's great. The Grail, the Holy Grail, is supposed to endow somebody with what? Immortality, infinite life, you know? So it's something that everyone is seeking, but you may not be able to get it. So it's supposed to be the greatest sort of acquisition that anyone could ever have. And when you apply that to knives, what I think we've really found is that the term Grail is absolutely a relative term. And it seems to have a whole lot to do with how much money you have floating around. For some people, Grails cost $100. Some people, Grails cost $100,000, and there's a lot of in between. And I think that as you collect knives, the term Grail evolves with your collection. So for me, I certainly remember when I started out collecting knives, I was doing some research, and the Benchmade 940 was the Grail of Grails. This was the ultimate EDC. If you go on YouTube, every single video says that it's the best EDC knife in the history of time. So that was my Grail. But I was able to buy that knife, and so I got it, and I saw that it was okay. And then it was a CT, and then it was a Spyderco Nirvana. This was a very specific Grail because I learned what the integral handle was, the one-piece titanium handle. And then I realized there was a custom version of that. That sort of unlocked the door for custom knives for me. And then it just spiraled out of control. So the term Grail, the goalposts moved each time I sort of opened a door. And that led all the way up into some super hyper knives. Specifically for me, I enjoyed watching YouTube videos. If that's not obvious, I make YouTube videos. And so does Tyler. But I started watching some of Jim Skelton's videos. I think those had a pretty big impact on my early learning about high-end knives. And the Frank Fisher Battle was a knife that stood out just because it was so crazy looking. And so I actually ended up getting my hands on a Frank Fisher Talon a while back. Some people might remember that from a while back on my channel. But I kind of learned the hard way. That knife cost $2,750 from the maker. And that was the most I have ever spent on a knife ever. That's probably the most that I've ever spent on a single object, really, in my whole life. And so when I got the knife, I kind of found that there were some imperfections in the sense that, like, I thought that as I spent more money, something would become more and more perfect, and I realized that that may not be true. And so I sold that knife, and I lost a bunch of money on it. And so the way that I've kind of felt about Grail knives is I'm going to apply an old saying where they say, don't meet your heroes. Because sometimes you really want something, or you really want something to be great, and then you get it, or you meet that person, or you get that knife, and it's really not as special as you thought. So what I think about what is a Grail now, my definition of a Grail as it stands is the ultimate version of a knife that I can get my hands on. And I've kind of been doing that. You know, this Spyderco Paramilitary 2 I'm holding, I kind of put scales on it and blue hardware, and to me that's kind of like, that's what I want. If I'm going to get something, I want it to be attainable, I want it to be good, but I want to have the very best version of that thing. And to me, those are the Grails that I'm seeking now.
100%, man. I think the adage "Don't meet your heroes" really applies to something that I'm going to talk about way later in the cast with my Grails. But very good points.
Thanks.
Definitely.
So I'll talk a little bit about my opinions on the matter. So I like to differentiate between two different terms. So for me, there's Grails, and then there's attainable Grails. So the former, regular Grails, are knives that you currently, and like Frank said, the goalpost always kind of moves, right? So like if I look at a $6,000 knife now and tell myself there's no way I can afford that, like that's obscene, you know, I can't have that, so I'm not going to have that, you know, my situation might change in the future, and that might become attainable. So in terms of using the terms Grail and attainable Grails, it still remains relative to what your current situation is. But to me, a Grail is something that you currently have no intention of ever possessing, and that could be due to sheer cost, or in some cases just due to rarity. Whereas attainable Grails, on the other hand, probably sort of scrape the upper edge of what the collector is willing to spend. And while it might not be in the cards just yet, it's something that the collector's sort of actively hoping to obtain. So for me, you know, a Grail is something that I'm either going to only ever be able to touch it at a show or never be able to touch it, period. Whereas an attainable Grail is something that is sort of, you know, on the upper echelon of where I'm at in my collecting career, but something that I'm actively looking for, you know. So if the right knife at the right price showed up on the market, it would be something that I would, you know, try my best to have in my possession. So for me, that's kind of the difference.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Because some knives are just you shouldn't buy them. You could go out and buy a $6,000 knife, but you might need to take out a loan.
Right.
You might need to start like working, on the streets and doing things you didn't think you'd ever have to do. But you could make it happen, but it would ruin your life. And so that's a good point between attainable grails and the sort of just crazy, out of this world, unattainable stuff.
Yeah, and like there's, it's pretty rare, and like the three of us participate in sort of the absolute high-end tactical knife market, right? Even though most of the knives that we have aren't very tactical, if you want to be honest. That is the genre in which we play, whereas the art knife world, especially with like engravings and stuff, that's when you get into $10,000 to $50,000 to $100,000 knives. And it's like, it's cool because it's fun to look at those sometimes. Those are the kinds of knives that are being bought by princes and stuff, right? And like, you see those at shows in probably Dubai and probably nowhere else. But so like those are really interesting. Like even though that's not really like what I collect, to me those are in some cases grails. Just because they look so pretty and what have you.
Yeah.
So Josh, talk to us a little bit about what you think.
If I ever start panhandling for like a custom knife, guys, just take me out of my misery. Cause I have a little cardboard sign. It's like, will work for Nirvana.
That's not what I really meant by work in the streets.
I'm not throwing a leg out for a custom knife. I don't even care. But
I mean, I'm not saying what I would do, wouldn't do. So, some knives are pretty awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh my god.
I'm just kidding.
Okay, so a Grail to me is I like to think of it as that old, have a fishing pole with a carrot on the end of the stick, and you're chasing that carrot, and no matter how much you kind of like the progression goes, how much you grow, that carrot is always in front of you, always out of reach, and it's always moving. Just a compound on what you guys said. It's the same thing. It changes as your circumstance changes, as your hedonic treadmill speeds up. And a Grail is one of those things. It's like it's always right there, and you can always visually see it, and you can start to try and figure out how to attain it. But as you start to reach out for that carrot, it just moves a little bit farther ahead. So no matter what, no matter where you're at on the journey, everybody's going to have a Grail, and everybody's Grail is going to be slightly different than the other person because everybody's at a different point on that. But one of the things that makes a Grail special to me is not just the money. I mean, it's got to have a monetary value to it as well, but the rarity of an item is what really, the rarity is what really drives it home for me. If I can just sit there and throw $10,000, $20,000, let's be crazy, $100,000 at a knife. I don't have that much money to throw at a car, much less a knife. So that's just speaking in terms. That doesn't mean as much because you didn't really quote unquote earn it. You just threw money at it and you got it. A Grail is something that you have to, again, quote unquote earn. You have to like really research and really try to either build a relationship with that maker to get them to make you something truly Grail worthy, truly special, or either you have to put in the research, the time to track something down. There's only one official Holy Grail, and that's the way I think of like my Grails. Is like when I get it, I want it to be like the only one in the world built exactly like this,
like your full Timascus liner lock.
Yeah, that was just fucking stupid, and and even well, I mean, it's the liners.
It's a thing. It's cool.
No, it's not a thing. It's for me. Yeah. Nobody else.
It's a thing now. Like you made it a thing. It now exists. It's crazy.
Ian was telling me the entire time. He's like, "This is retarded." I was like, "Yeah, but I want it." And the thing is like, he's not ever gonna build another one like that. Nobody else. Like who? Like tell me, like how many people can say they have a liner lock and the liners are Damascus and the scales are Zircotai? It's absurd. But to me, that was a Grail. The Argonaut model was a Grail, and that configuration that I got him to build for me made it my Grail. Because nobody else you're gonna see is like, yeah, just let's add a $500 to the cost. Just put some Damascus liners in there. Nobody will see them unless you're looking at the butt of it. But let's do it, you know.
No, I think you bring up a good point that like there's an emotional factor, right? So that it's not all about the money. And you know, getting to work with a maker. We have a friend, Josh and I, in the knife community from Reddit, who, you know, I know has worked with Andre Thorburn back and forth for over a year now on a particular build. But I mean, the whole idea is that that's going to be the one. You know what I mean? So
exactly,
there's definitely value in doing that.
Well, my question now, you've gone to the idea of the one. Hey, I'm sure that at some point in the past, you have both obtained the one, right? Have you done that yet? And is that actually possible? If this guy who you say has this knife built by Thorburn after a year of perfecting it, he gets it in hand, how many minutes will it be until he has another Grail?
Yeah,
like seconds.
Yeah, I don't think that the idea is to ever end the chase.
Yeah.
Right? And if that is the goal that you have, I think that's because you're maybe a little bit naive and you haven't spent the time and the money yet. But like once you do, you know, there's always something else to get. But it could be the one and only for that maker. You know what I mean? So like this Thorburn that I picked up, my L36 is, you know, pretty typical Thorburn, and emotionally that will always be one of my favorite knives. Whereas this Julian one that pretty much matches, you know, I'm not as emotionally tied to it because the way I procured it was very simple. It was just a purchase. But like mechanically and from an artistic perspective, it's sort of like the ultimate Grail for me, the sort of perfect configuration on a Thorburn. So there's, I think, different versions of Grails as well.
And that's a really good point you brought up, because the way that was really good. The way I said it, it sounds like it's the one knife. No, it's the way I think about it, and to make myself clear, it's the one for that model, right?
Right.
So like on the Argonaut, that is the one Argonaut. That's not my one only Grail. That's the one Argonaut for me. And the Argonaut as a whole was a Grail, and getting that one made like that for me was the Grail for that. So if that's like my ultimate Argonaut, and then as soon as I get that, I'm like, okay, well, now I need the one of this, or the Koenig Arius or something, as an example, as being my ultimate Koenig. It never ends. It's
I would say I'm right there with you, though. I agree. Now my goal is to always have the ultimate version of whatever that model is.
Exactly. And that's fun. That's really fun. And it's always about the journey as far as like the destination. Usually when you get to the destination, you're always thinking about your next journey. And that's the same thing with the knives.
Yeah.
100%. Before we move on, I just want to, this is kind of dawning on me, a quick plug. If you are a Redditor, r/Grail Knives, go check that out. It's a place that I developed for, you know, people to really be able to focus on the sort of the higher end stuff. You know, r/Knife Club is great, but it's also a lot of Gerbers and Spydercos and whatever. And so if you want a place where you can view these crazy Damascus liner locks and whatever else the hell, head on over to r/Grail Knives. Check it out.
A guy just posted a crazy ass Resenti.
The Resenti, yeah.
Yeah.
Blue dragon skin Damascus blade.
Mocha tie.
Wait, I need to go look at this right now.
Yeah.
I know. it's mouth watering. I'm like, damn, that's insane. You know?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I think I'm first up, and this kind of goes back to what I mentioned before with Frank's adage. I recently sort of like had my Grail hunt shattered by reality. There were a few knives that I was interested in, and I am no longer really interested in due to certain mechanical and design flaws. The Shark Knife Co. Ryu, the Lee Lerman Hydra, and the Black Snow Customs Sabotage were all on that list. But for example, the Shark Knife Co. Ryu, anybody who's seen the end of my Nikiri video will know that like it's not mechanically where I want it to be. So I'm given to understand that everyone seems to know that Edison Barajas, he makes these knives with really tight lockup geometry rather. And the problem with that is he like has purposeful lock stick. And that absolutely drives me nuts. So the contact point for the lock bar and the tang is such a tight fit that you can't actually even move the knife into the lockup position with your hands. Like it takes the momentum of fully deploying the knife to even get it to lock up. That's how tight of a fit it is. And so like I'm like not interested in reuse now because of that. I was under the impression that that was like a knife to knife thing, but I was told by some very high end collectors that that's something that everybody knows is present on his knives. So that's kind of devastating. And then like with the Lerman Hydra and the Black Snow Sabotage, both of those were kind of ruined for me just by the sheer shape of the flipper tab. Sometimes when you look at pictures on Instagram and on the internet and stuff, you don't sort of take the time to look at little details. You know, you're just like, ooh, that knife's design is beautiful. Ooh, the action looks so good. And you just sort of get it in your head that it's going to work for you. But I had a friend pick up a Sabotage. You know, I looked a little bit more closely at the Hydra, and they have these sort of not super comfortable looking flipper tabs. And so that's kind of a bummer. So it's interesting how like those were the things that I was sort of after, and it's little details that make me just like not really interested anymore. So those are kinds of unfortunate examples of like meeting your heroes. But my attitude towards Grails overall has really shifted from being in search of a particular model to being in search of a particular knife. And this sort of goes back to what you guys were just saying at the end of the last section, which is that it's sort of like being in search of the ultimate version of a specific model. And I wanted to sort of explain variants as well. So anybody who hasn't attended a show or maybe tried a bunch of the same model might not realize that when you get into these custom knives, and like it's true of the CNC knives, but it's even more true of the handmade knives, but really any high-end custom knife maker, if you walk up to a table and they have 5 of the same model, you can pick up all 5, and it's almost guaranteed that all 5 are going to function a little bit differently. Not every detent is dialed in exactly like the last one. Not every lock bar is dialed in exactly like the last one. And so what you have is a situation where I think the community and collectors get super amped about a specific model, right? We've all talked about the hype train. We were talking about that before we started recording today. And people just get really motivated to buy a new model. And what actually happens is some people get ones that are great, some people get ones that are okay, some people get ones that have flaws. But it's not really until you have that experience of sort of trying the same model back to back that you start to understand the level of variance in between the knives. And so for me, it's certainly no longer a search for a particular model, but rather finding the best example of that model, both mechanically and in terms of the configuration and how much I appreciate the aesthetics of the knife. So it's sort of all been brought to the point of just looking for a specific knife. So for example, the Gavco Leopard that I have, right? I talk about in my video on YouTube about that knife how it sort of like doesn't meet any of my criteria. If I was like looking for a knife, it's sort of like not a model that I would typically be interested in. It's not a configuration that I would particularly be interested in considering the thumb studs. And it's like a sheep's foot blade and everything like that. But when it all came together on that specific knife, it's just the detent's perfect, the lock bar's perfect, the clip is perfect, and all the little details on that knife sort of came together to make it the perfect knife for me. Even though on an individual level, any one mechanic or one design feature would not be on my list of things that I would consider desirable. So it's really interesting just sort of trying to find the exact knife as opposed to the exact maker or the exact model or what have you. Having said that, there's still a couple of things that I consider grails, and these are like real grails, not attainable grails. So there's a very particular liner lock Ryu that was sold at TKI 2017. Or maybe, I don't know, that wasn't at the beginning of this year, was it? But if that knife had no lock stick, I wrote down I'd sell my unborn babies for it. And it's it's carbo quartz scales with blue Timascus bolsters, and it's just,
I think I remember that one. Yeah.
oh my god.
Yeah.
It was the white carbo quartz.
No, it was black.
No, it was
Black carbo
black?
quartz
Black,
scales.
black.
And to me, that's like the ultimate config, right? Like if I was to build a knife with Edison, that would be probably what I ask for. And again, so it's kind of like, I don't know if that knife has the lock stick issue. Like I wouldn't want to own it, even if you told me it was only $500, which is not, of course. But even if it was only $500, like I don't want it if it's mechanically not interesting. But man, if that knife has no mechanical flaws, it would easily be like a top end Grail for me. The next is Sergei Shirogorov, full custom. Those things are bonkers. I think we've talked about those on the podcast before. If not, we've certainly had conversations among the three of us about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shiros are cool, right? They have all these different tiers. There's base level Shiros. There's the R line or the Three Bears, where things get a little more interesting with multi-row and internal milling. And then you can jump into the custom division world, and that sort of has its own level of tiers, and that's when you get into the cylindrical roller bearings and all this crazy stuff. And certain custom divisions are still pretty standard Shiros, just with maybe a little bit more fancy milling or a different color. Some get into even higher end materials. You might find a Timascus clip or an interesting inlay here and there. But it's not until you get to the Sergei handmade customs. I mean, I'm sure he still makes all the parts CNC because that's how their business is built. But the full Sergei customs, the ones that he brought to TKI, were like fucking bonkers. I mean, you've got this like lava Damascus over white and black carbo quartz with crazy milling and, a finger flick hole in the blade and like all kinds of insane stuff. So, his knives are like super expensive, but they're also particularly hard to find, right? I'm pretty sure the only show that he goes to in the US is TKI. I could be incorrect on that, but, I didn't see him at Blade Show last year or anything. I saw Sinkovich and Recon 1, but that was it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of like the high-end Russian collectors end up with his knives in their hands, but I don't think a lot of US guys get the actual Sergei knives. So those things are ballistic. I would absolutely love to own one of those.
Totally.
Yep.
They're insane.
Yeah, dude, they're bonkers. They're so cool.
Yeah.
And then the last one for me, David Santiago. Maybe not the most popular knife maker. He's a little bit younger, but the people that are into his knives have driven his prices through the freaking roof. His knives are going for $5,000 to $10,000 now. It's just bonkers. But man, he does this like really unique blade shape. He's got a particular model that I'm interested in. I don't actually know the name of the model. Every single knife that I've seen him make in the last year has been the same model, so I don't know the name. But it's a really interesting blade shape, a really interesting blade grind. My only sort of criticism or critique of the knife is that the clip sits really high on the frame. So you would have a ton of knife sticking out of your pocket, which maybe isn't great when you spent $8,000 on it. But yeah, so like to me, those are the few remaining Grails that, and in terms of like meeting your hero or having mechanical flaws, I had a buddy recently who was able to play with some of the Santiago knives, and he was like, yeah, they fit your, my sort of palette, right, of desire. Yeah, my preferences. So to me, that's definitely something that's on my list. I hope he's at Blade Show. I'd love to try out the knives. But right now, I'd say Sergei and Santiago are absolute upper echelon for me. But again, other than that, I really don't have any like more sort of model based Grails. To me, it's all about finding that specific knife. And if that's just a matter of going to a show and picking every single one up on a table and or just finding the perfect configuration like this Thorburn was for me, that's really what it all boils down to. So I think configuration and then sort of finding the right one with the right mechanical variants is really what like drives home the ultimate knife for me, which is why that Gavco and that Thorburn are so impressive to me. You know, they're not models that I would normally choose, you know, but just something about how everything on the knife came together, the overall theme was just perfect for me and made it the ultimate Grail, and that's why I don't think I can let go of those knives anytime soon. But yeah, that pretty much does it for how the sort of Grails that I'm interested in.
Those are certainly some good Grails. Yeah.
Josh, you're up next. Talk to us.
Yeah, especially those Sergei Chiragorov knives. Like, I feel like if I could sell every knife that I've ever owned in my life just to get one, I would. I wouldn't do it, but I would want to.
Yeah, I hear you.
Those knives are insane.
Yeah.
Just looking at them, you know. But for me, the three knives that I have picked out today as my top three. They're more models based and stuff. But if I ever had the chance to work with these makers, which, well, I'm just saying, I don't even know if some of these makers will work with you like that. These would definitely fit in that. This is my Grail of my specific preference. The first one is a Michael Raymond Starlet. This guy, he is a very interesting dude. He
So hot
actually,
right now, that Michael Raymond.
yeah,
So
he
hot
is
right
very
now.
hot. Yeah, he's kind of starting to ride into a bubble. He became a knife maker after seeing Scott Cook's work. So Scott Cook, if you've ever seen, you know, a Michael Raymond knife, his design language is taken directly from him, and you can see that based upon, you know, just him being a very close apprentice to Scott Cook and learning from him. And Michael Raymond, he went to school as a specialized engineer, or he went to engineering school and machinist school, and then he went and started working in a tool and die shop for like an aircraft industry, and he really, really started focusing on like exacting tolerances and how far he could push the machines to get, you know, just those plus and minus 5 of 10,000, you know, tolerance specs and stuff. And it's just crazy how much he progressed in doing that within his field. And then when he started making knives, he took that with him. His goal, he stated on his website right here that his goal was to craft investment grade knives worthy of being handed down through generations. So when he looks at a knife, he wants it to be almost heirloom quality, and he wants it to be robust enough to last not just my lifetime, but somebody else's. My daughter or son or whoever would get that knife, and that's he says he wants something that will stand the test of time, and that's a very important goal of his when he goes out to design a knife, and I have to respect that. Anytime you hear about that, you know the guy is really thinking more so about materials, as in design and execution of that design, not just throwing a bunch of beautiful. I'm not going to say names, but there's some high-end makers. They put lipstick on a pig and it sells for $10,000, and it's a horrible knife. And I don't know if I could ever support somebody like that. And when I see somebody,
I know who you're talking about.
no, I'm not saying names, but there's a couple of high-end makers doing that, and that's extremely ugly.
Mhm.
And I don't see how I don't think they ever have repeat business. Let me just put it that way. And Michael Raymond is one of those guys that I can see his work creeping up into that level of I don't know, the price factor and everything. It's almost like there's this certain group of makers that's like the Grail makers almost. All their knives are like crazy amounts of money. Nobody can ever find them. And I feel like if Michael Raymond keeps it up and this bubble doesn't, sorry for the pun, burst him, you know, because we've seen that happen where a bubble will hit a maker like him, and it jet him up, and then after it bursts, nobody is interested in those knives for that price. But The Starlet is a knife of his. It's an integral, which if anybody knows me, they know I love integrals. And he says it consists of only arches, so no straight lines, which is incredible. You know, you start to think about that. He went into that design. He didn't want any straight lines. And he uses a CNC. So this is a CNC made knife, and he 3D machines the shit out of it. Like, I was reading about the pocket clip. There's like 9 different axes or something. I don't even begin to understand that. But when you hear about that, you know that a lot of time and effort is going into every little thing that he does. So he, when he makes this knife, he uses these thumb lugs, and the best way I can describe these thumb lugs is they look like the thumb lugs on a Kershaw Blur, but they're kind of like scout. I mean, they do. I mean, I got to be honest, but these things are perfectly placed, and it looks like, you know, they're very comfortable to use. He can make them out of copper. He makes them titanium and stuff, and he usually mirrors, you know, puts 2 on each side, or 1 on each side. Sorry, and just reading his website, it's kind of like the Holtz, like on the Holt Blade Works, it's a totally different knife, but they really focus on the engineering, and you can tell they really care about the engineering side, and they really put a lot of thought into it. And the same thing happens with this guy. When you start reading through his website, and this guy is just listing off stuff after stuff after stuff, specs, you can tell how passionate, just by reading this, how passionate and how important those details are. And the cool thing about it too is he literally makes everything in-house for his knives, except for the detent and the washers. Everything else you see on this knife, is even including the screw and the pivot, is completely made by him, and that's insane. And he does all this cool stuff with them. He'll put an inlay into like the pocket clip. He'll put an inlay into the pivot. He'll put an inlay into like the actual knife itself. And when you start thinking about that, he's putting an inlay and all this stuff into integrals. That's not easy. Making integrals not easy. And then he like goes a step farther. And it's just insane just to see how exact everything is. Like, it looks like there's no gaps anywhere on any of the stuff. Like, even if you took your fingernail and rubbed it across, it would be some of the best work. Then, I've never handled these, so I can't say for sure. But yeah, it's just insane. So
I want to add one thing too. You were mentioning the inlays and everything. So when he makes his own pivot, he has to make his own pivot tool because it's a proprietary pivot.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Okay, yeah. But so have you seen on like the Carbo Quartz build that Rit got that he did a Carbo Quartz inlay on the pivot tool?
The pivot tool. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
He matches the pivot tool to the knife itself.
Yeah, it's sick.
Yeah. So yeah, his pivots are proprietary, but he goes a step farther and he makes the tool to go with the knife, and then, just as Tyler just said, he matches it to the knife. So that's how much he cares about what he's doing. You can tell when somebody cares about it enough to go in that much detail in the freaking tool that's all it is used to take his knife apart, and he's putting that much detail into it. I don't know. I just gush over stuff like that. That is like...
Man, I don't know if there's any more gushing you could possibly do right now on this guy.
I know.
He's going to have to wipe himself off after this.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you might put a leg out for one of these knives. We'll see.
Oh, man. I don't know. It's just... the more I think about everything, it's like... Dude, that is like my ideal knife. I don't care if it's made by hand or whatever. But if I was to get one, I would get one with his jig titanium. He jigs it and gets some type of crazy exotic inlay. My next one, but that's enough about him.
I mean, I would agree that those are spectacular knives. I have a very soft spot for integral knives, and he's doing some of the best out there, definitely.
Yeah, I just love it when I see that passion come through. Like, you can see it just reading through his website about how much he cares about what he does.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
His knives are going to get obscenely priced, though, very soon. Because I think that one you guys are talking about, the Carbo Quartz, it was an auction knife.
Was it 12,000 or something like that?
12,000, yeah. So, I mean, this is a gauge that makers use to be like, oh, I guess I can sell my knives for X amount of dollars. So
I don't think
we'll see.
I don't actually think anybody needs to be that worried about Raymond, because in terms of the bubble that people are referring to, in discussing it with a close friend of mine, what it appears to actually be is that when a couple knives sold well, it isn't that sort of the price of the market went up. It's that a bunch of people who have owned his knives for a long time and could not previously get out of those knives for a reasonable amount of money started posting theirs on the secondary to try to sort of take advantage of the fact that his name was now out in the open. But at the same time, Michael is a part-time maker and puts out very few products. So while I'm not arguing the fact that like an auction piece might go for some astronomical value, I also don't perceive it to be like the volume of knives that he's putting out makes it so that it can't get too crazy. And also, being a washer knife and everything, it doesn't necessarily fit into the current tactical knife market as well as some other knives. So while there's certainly plenty of collectors out there who are willing to appreciate a knife like that, I don't really see it getting like crazy like the way that the Ryu has sort of gotten crazy over the last 6 months or anything like that. I mean, that's my personal opinion. I could be 100% wrong. But I do think that the situation around Michael is slightly different than some other makers, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I mean, we can all speculate on the market and how it works, but we really don't know. And like you said, one of the things about his knives is he's part-time, so he makes very few. And that's always an issue when you're talking about somebody that starts to gain popularity, even just a little bit. If the supply doesn't meet the demand, the price is going to rise, economics 101. And then there's going to find that market's going to settle, and then people go away, and then his prices are either going to go back down, or he's going to make even less and less knives to keep the price around the same. But what I know from people that own these knives are like $2,000 normally, $1,500. That $12,000 is something crazy out of left field, like you described, Tyler. Black Snow Customs, as Tyler kind of mentioned earlier. One of their knives, the Sabotage, is one of my Grails, especially the mini Sabotage, which is 3.5 inches. So it's not mini, but it is mini compared to his normal model, which is 4.25 inches. That's just a freaking pocket sword times 2. And the 3.5 inch model just seems like it would be perfect for me. Ever since I first laid eyes on these knives, they have been some of the most visually captivating I've ever seen. And the guy, his name is Nadi Amor, and he used to be a jeweler. So for 17.5 years, he had been, taking these exotic metals and materials and crafting them into beautiful works of jewelry. And he had a friend, Lee Lerman, who kind of got him into the knife business. And everybody knows Lee Lerman is the guy that makes the Hydra, also a very amazing Grail-worthy knife. So he got him into the knife business, and what I love about his knives is you can really see and that all that experience that he had as a jeweler just shine when he comes to using these knives or making these knives and using those materials. He just does amazing jobs at every step of the way, and just watching his process pictures from where he goes from step to step, and it's just, you can see the detail. Again, it's all about the details to me. Like, I love seeing when people actually, show me progress, and then they explain like what they're doing. I don't know, I'm rambling at this point, but what I'm trying to say,
yes.
See, I get into like a little ramble, every single time I start talking about stuff I'm passionate about, I start rambling. It's an issue.
Those are interesting knives. They certainly have a very unique feel in the hand. I was very lucky to get to handle a small one and a large one at Slice over there with Matt Patton. He had a couple.
Right.
And very interesting ergonomics. It's like a rounded sort of a shape. It's like a banana almost, the overall shape.
Like a kukri or something weird.
Yeah, and the blade profile is very unique. They're cool knives, and they're beautiful. Absolutely. Maybe the first one I'll ever get is the Spider Code that's coming out.
Right. I want to try. Yeah.
Yeah, there goes Tyler. Ugh. Spyderco, so it's terrible. It just ruins everything.
Well, here, let me say something positive, because we've mentioned Lerman a couple times, and I mentioned that, the Hydra's off my list for a reason or two. But if any listeners are tuned into the podcast and you're not familiar with Lee Lerman's work, I encourage you to specifically go look at the backspacer of Hydras. I personally feel that they are the most elaborate and impressive backspacers on the market, because each individual backspacer is not only a hand-shaped piece of whatever exotic material probably matches the bolster or whatever, but he has individual rods that go through the backspacer and are fitted into each side of the frame, and there's maybe 20 rods or more per knife. It is fucking insane. So I think that maybe he's doing the most impressive backspacer work in the tactical knife market right now.
Yeah, and he makes those rods himself, right?
Dude, it's insane. Yeah. Insane.
Yeah. I'm seeing that now. I don't think I noticed that before now. That's crazy.
Yeah, he doesn't just buy little rods. He makes his own little rods. It's just, and we're starting to see a pattern here. Like when you start thinking about Grail knives, you start hearing about things like where people are making everything in-house, or they're doing extravagant work. And that goes into it. That's kind of like what makes it a Grail, just because it's very special in the way it's made. And like with the Sabotage, like I said, the dude was a jeweler, and he takes all that experience and he puts it into that knife, and it's as beautiful as any ring or any piece of jewelry as I've ever seen. And he does amazing, amazing, amazing work. Going on to my last guy. This is a guy that honestly, I'm going to be 100% honest with you guys. I didn't even know he existed until the ZT 0055 came out. So some of you already might know. This is the GTC Gus Kikini. And I said his name right this time, right?
I think so. I don't even know, man. I haven't heard him say his name. So
he's an Italian. I found that out through research. The dude, he's Italian. His name is Italian, but he moved down there to Brazil or wherever he's at.
You got it.
Yeah, Brazil. Yeah. And he's a farmer. Like he's not a farmer. That's to be disrespectful to his name. He's like some type of farming engineer guy. I don't remember the exact word. And I'm sorry if Gus listens to this, which I'm pretty sure he doesn't. Sorry if I don't know your exact job title.
He won't. I think we're good.
But he's an engineer, and you know how engineers think. They think about everything, and the knife I'm talking about in particular is he's started to kind of do these integrals. I don't want to say kind of. They are integrals. But if you guys just listening, look at his most recent work that he's posted on Instagram. It is mind-boggling. He has just posted this Integral Stampede SLT model. And the integral part about it is it's not like a full, like when you think about an integral, you think of a fully enclosed back because that makes it integral. No, this guy has milled it out to make it look like two separate pieces of titanium until you get to the very end where a normal backspacer might be, and that's the integral part. So he
cuts it out of one piece of titanium, then he folds it over.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's crazy. It's flexing the concept of what an integral is. Like some people like a Raymond like mill it out of one block and it's in that shape, but he's doing sort of a new way where he cuts out a flat piece and then he bends it over. That's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you said, it's totally different. Nobody else. I don't know of anybody else to do this. I think he's the first guy to do this.
Yeah.
And when you think about, it still fits. It's one piece of titanium. It's not two, so it still fits the definition. But and when he does this, like the one that he just posted, this is the first Integral Stampede that he's posted. It almost looks like the back of it is kind of like a muzzle brake from a rifle, and he usually puts like some type of design flair into it. It is incredible. Like I cannot say enough nice things about it. That would be one of my ultimate grails, I would think. Just getting a piece from him like this, especially the Stampede. The Stampede model is they say drop point, but to me it kind of looks like a reverse Tanto blade shape with like a swedge, but the swedge doesn't start until it's a swedge ended like halfway through. It doesn't go all the way to the end. It's crazy. And then of course the SLT, which is what we talked about last time in mechanisms. It's a spring-loaded tab. He puts knurling on the tab. The tab, when you flip it over, it hides. I love stuff like that. The detail work he puts into it, and the colors he gets out of his like Zerkatine Damascus. If I was to get one from him, I'd like a full piece of Zerkatine from him, integral, like the way he did it right here. And I don't know how to describe his Zerkatine or Damascus without you guys looking. I guess the best way, it looks like an oil slick.
Yeah, he gets these very light greens and pinks and reds, and it's interesting, very different.
Yeah, do you guys think it's Electro?
No,
it looks flame.
It's still heat, but he's probably just doing it in some unique way.
Cool.
It just it looks like an oil slick. It's weird. It's uniquely him.
It's true. And he's a master. That's some good stuff. But they're crazy expensive. They're super expensive.
Oh yeah.
I mean, are they? Not compared to everything else we've been talking about.
Yeah, maybe not table prices, but secondary prices go sky high.
They're like $2,000 to $7,000. They're not too bad.
Well, these integrals,
it's not too bad. No, it's not too bad.
Well, so I don't know relatively speaking to all the other makers we've mentioned, he's right in the same price point. No, I know.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you're right though. You're right. Yeah, he's not 100,000. So you're right.
But if I could get my hands on one of these guys, I don't know what I would do. I'd be like, I might put a leg out in the street. Let's be real here.
It's interesting. I've got a buddy who has one, and he was I
know who you're talking about.
Yeah, he was really unimpressed actually with the mechanics of it and like the way that it feels. So I think it's interesting that you brought up, sort of the way an engineer thinks. And I work for a company where there's sort of back and forth with engineers, and it's almost like he's got too much of an engineer's approach because the knife is so sort of like perfectly constructed, and then when you actually put it in your hand, it's kind of a nightmare. It's kind of like sharp edges and really weird shapes, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I mean, collect any knife for any reason that you want to, but it was interesting to hear that as a knife, it's actually kind of a piece of shit. But as an art piece, it's fantastic.
As a functional piece, maybe not so good, but as an art piece,
I think all of his work, to me, it's maybe some of it, not so much. It's always form over function. Like, that was the biggest complaint with the ZT model. Everybody hated it because it was all form over function. So I think going into his work, kind of like having that, you can't think of it as being like the ultimate knife,
right?
More as like the ultimate piece of art that looks like a knife, almost.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, on the very end of the spectrum in terms of fitting into the tactical knife genre, but very much being an art piece. I mean, there's other makers that sort of scrape that edge too. But yeah, he's definitely getting there.
Cool choices, man. Very cool choices. I guess that takes me into my section here about my grails. I've kind of been writing up some notes as we've been going along, and I have more than just 3, but I'll try to go through them relatively quickly. I wanted to focus on a couple of grails of mine and grail makers, I guess. And my number 1 is Peter Rizzenti. Peter Rizzenti made what was my first grail knife, and that's the Nirvana. After I got the production Spyderco Nirvana, it was like a matter of weeks before I was begging him to sell me one of his customs for 3 to 4 times as much money. And everything that he makes to me is just really cool. I think that if I were making knives myself, and I don't want to draw any of the commentary that's going to bring, but if I were designing knives, I think they would look something like what he's doing. The integral handles, the sizes of the knives that he makes, the grinds that he's doing, just sort of the accent pieces. He does a very sort of clean sort of design language. He does a lot of I'll call it gray and silver, and it's plain. And for that reason, actually, specifically, Tyler is not the biggest fan of his work because it's expensive but plain. I happen to like that very much. So all of his knives, each one that I see is like a new Grail to me, and I'm very excited about it right now because I have a new Rosenti coming my way at the Blade Show, but his knives just stay there for me. I would love to get one of these crazy Timascus or Mokutai and Dragon Skin combos just to have an art piece, just because I find his knives very awesome. What do you guys think?
I think.
I mean, you said my opinion for me.
Yeah.
I think Rosenti, he is the master of user finishes, and he makes user finishes that are beautiful as well. Like that mirror wash. Oh my god.
Yeah.
And it's not going to pick up scratches. Not so much as a satin,
Yeah.
It's
with
beautiful.
The stonewash on it.
Yeah. I mean, he makes the rasp that I gave you. Well, not gave you, loaned you.
You gave it to me. Thanks.
Oh yeah.
Oh, thank you.
It has a mirror wash type finish, but I think Rosenti is just an absolute master of those finishes.
Yeah. And just the action, the detent on his flippers are good, and I just really like his work. And so anything that he's going to release, I'm going to be following, and he's got some more models planned. He and I talk every now and again, and he's got some great things coming up over the next year. So definitely keep an eye out for his stuff. The next person that I'm going to say makes some grails that I'm actually possibly going to achieve one day is Robert Carter. I have the BBM that he did a collaboration with Nick Chupra, and he kind of made this mid-tech BBM. That kind of got me turned on to his designs and stuff. I definitely had the Talon, which was a Frank Fisher and Robert Carter collaboration, so I've kind of been following his work. And one of the things that I like about Rob Carter that not a lot of makers do is that a lot of his knives are made out of sole authorship material. Sole authorship referring to the fact that he makes the materials himself, the Timascus, which he calls Robmascus, or Robtanium, and then he makes Damascus himself and Sanmai himself that he calls Robmascus. He makes his own black Timascus type of things and his own patterns, and the material combinations and the designs that he comes up with are absolutely beautiful and at the same time very functional. He makes these rather functional blade shapes. He makes a Warncliffe. He's called the Warfighter. He makes the custom tech right now, sort of a mid-tech version, but he makes the F-16 that's like a Tanto and a few other models in there, and I just find his work really cool. And I think he's a cool guy. I've spoken with him a few times. He's really funny. He's really laid back. I haven't met him in person. I'm looking forward to that, but I just like his designs, and I love the fact that he's building his own materials. There are a few other guys out there who are doing that, but some of their knives are not really to my taste. But I think Rob kind of hits the nail on the head for me.
Most definitely, he's got that collaboration, the auction piece with CMF, with Ian.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting. That'll be a Blade Show.
Yeah, it's F-16.
I think we're both going to be able to see that before the Blade Show, from what I understand.
Yeah, it's in the mail on its way to me, I think.
Oh, my God. That's amazing.
Dude, Ian should send it to me, too.
Hey, man, you don't make videos, bro.
I do take amazing pictures, though. Shut up.
Yeah, we gotta make those videos before Blade Show. We gotta hype it up. Anyways.
I was just joking.
So moving on. So Rob Carter, awesome maker, awesome guy, cool materials. The next one, I was gonna mention the full custom Shirogorovs. I think Tyler did a good job of talking about that. Especially recently, I don't know what it is, but in the last maybe 2 years or maybe just 1 year, they've just been upping their game to this stratospheric level. It's unbelievable. And I would love to pick one up if I ever have that possibility. I got to go to TKI one day.
I mean, the Russians, and Frank, you know more about this than me, so help me out here. They seem to be doing a lot of their own material development separate from what other makers in other countries are able to purchase. So
I appreciate you saying that. It just so happens that I have been very fortunate to develop a relationship with a carbon fiber maker, the carbon fiber maker that supplies Shirogorov. And so that has borne some fruit in a number of different places, including for you, Tyler.
Yeah.
And so it's It's pretty interesting, and
but it really gives their knives such a unique look compared to, you know what I mean? Like you can look at a South African maker and a US maker and a Canadian maker and a French maker, and all their models will be somewhat different and whatever, but if all their carbon fiber or all their Timascus comes from the same two guys for the world, you know what I mean? Every knife ends up sort of looking the same almost, and when these guys come out with these knives with totally unique materials and stuff, it really puts their knives in a category of their own.
Agreed.
Yeah, just amazing work coming out on all fronts out there.
Speaking of amazing work, I wanted to talk about two sort of unobtainable grails and kind of lump them together. The Stan Wilson non-flipper flipper and the Frank Fisher battle. I kind of consider the Stan Wilson, Todd Fisher, Frank Fisher group is sort of one sort of group of people making knives because they all live literally next door to each other, and their designs are overlap in certain ways. In any case, the non-flipper flipper is an insane knife where Stan Wilson builds it, to the 11 out of 10 level, where even the inside of the liners that face the scales are jeweled,
yeah.
And you'll never see that. The material combinations that he uses are spectacular. He doesn't forge his own materials, but he has a very good eye for alignment and using these fancy materials to be very beautiful. Some people go off the deep end and it becomes gaudy. And some of Stan Wilson's knives, yes, admittedly, are over the deep end, but I think he does it as well or better than a lot of people. He has a beautiful grind on this knife. It's got that unique mechanism, and they cost $8,000 to $18,000, depending on your spec. So I don't think I'll ever get one because of my experience spending that much. I've handled one, and it's a wonderful piece, but I don't see myself spending that much money. Similarly, the Frank Fisher battle has a spot in my heart because I saw it in a Jim Skelton video. And ever since then, it's sort of been like the Lamborghini poster on my wall, where it's like that knife is so extreme, it's so awesome, it looks like it's going fast, but I would never really want to own or drive or have it because I know that it's not really going to be that functional for me, and for that reason, it would sort of spoil it. But those two knives are sort of my, if one's a Ferrari poster, the other's a Lamborghini poster, that's what those knives are to me.
Let me add to that, because I think it's you sort of lump them in together, which is fine, but I think there's an important distinction to be made, which is that Frank's knives are CNC, Stan's are entirely handmade, and when you consider the non-flipper flipper, and you've handled one, it's probably the same one that I handled at Blade Show last year. I'm assuming you handled.
It was Matt Patton's.
Yeah. So when I met Stan Wilson and Matt and got to play with the knife at Blade Show, not only is the mechanism so incredibly well developed, and you can hopefully corroborate this claim, which is that the tolerances, particularly between the moving bolster and the scale, the fact that those are executed by hand is probably one of the most spectacular and telling aspects of Stan as a maker.
I mean, those knives are overhyped, but there's a reason. They are damn perfect. Just perfect. There's one particular non-flipper flipper, and I think the guy posted a picture of it today. I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly whose knife it is, but the whole scale is Mokutai, I think, or Timascus. Don't get mad at me. It's one of those two. And but the bolster is cut out from the piece. It's all one piece, but it looks like there's no gap.
Right.
You don't see the line where the bolster is, and the whole mechanism relies on that motion. It's spectacular.
And that's done by hand.
Yeah, that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
That specific one. Okay, those two are sort of my unobtainable ones, but I want to finish by just saying that my grails now, after having spent a ton of money on a knife and kind of regretting it, basically, I'm searching right now. I have some grails that I'm going to be chasing, and I will achieve, but they're basically better versions of knives that I already have. I've owned a bunch of knives now. I've handled a bunch of knives, and so I've been fortunate that I've been able to sort of get my collection to a point where I have some knives that I really, really like, and so I'm getting better versions of those knives. I'm getting a better Koenig Arius. I'm getting. I just found out I might be working on a new Guthrie Scout, and there may be something with Gareth Bull coming up sometime in the next, maybe the next decade. We'll see when it gets done, but yeah, we'll see. So, but that's what I'm chasing now. I'm chasing better Grail versions of some of the knives that I have because I like them so much.
There you go.
Yeah, I think you and I were doing the same thing. The 3 knives I talked about earlier, those are things I dream about and I passively chase. If something comes along, of course, I'm gonna hop on it if it comes to that. But what I'm actively chasing is exactly what you just described, like unique to me everyday, not even everyday knives, but obtainable knives, quote unquote obtainable. But something like that, just making them special. Exactly like you described. I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, guys. I think that was a good little roundup of, how we feel about Grail knives and what we're after. Let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Anybody got notable news? I know that we're just about 4 weeks away from Blade Show. Woo!
Yeah, Blade Show is the only thing on my mind right now. I'm really looking forward to it. That's all I can really think about. That's the news right now. Everyone's getting their Blade Show knives together. There's kind of a hush in the community because everyone's sort of holding back, and then it's all going to release in a couple of weeks.
This is the quiet before the storm right now.
Exactly.
It is. It's always fun to see all the makers sort of, post big shots of their entire collection that they're bringing and everything right before the show. So it's going to be exciting.
Absolutely. And all 3 of us will be there.
Absolutely. I'm stoked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you see any of us, say hi, please.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this one up, guys. Message to all of the people listening. You can email us at theknifecast@gmail.com with any questions or commentary. We haven't really been doing it, but if we can get some questions in, we would love to include short little Q&As at the end of every episode. So if you guys have anything that you want us to discuss, any feedback, commentary, or questions you would like to ask, please go ahead and shoot us an email or hit us up on Instagram. Doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and find out where we can find everybody. Frank?
I am available at Dr. Frunky on YouTube and on Instagram at Dr. Frunky. And you can email me at drfrunky@gmail.com.
Josh?
I am on Instagram, and it is Echo Does Knives. Throw some underscores in there for fun because Instagram hates spaces, and you can shoot me a message over there, and I'd love to talk to you guys about knives.
Sweet. Find me on YouTube, Tovarishworks, on Instagram at Tovarishworks. Email me, tovarishworks@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and we will see you next time.